KiWi Musikbibliothek. Radikal subjektive Liebeserklärungen an die Musik. Mit Chilly Gonzales über Enya.
Herzlich willkommen zur KiWi Musikbibliothek. Es gibt ein neues Buch in unserer wunderschönen Reihe und der Autor heute führt uns in eine völlig neue Situation. Wir sind nicht in einem Studio, sondern wir sind im Musikzimmer des Autors. Und der Autor liegt auf dem Sofa vor mir und ich begrüße ihn jetzt herzlich. Hallo Chilly.
Hallo. Gemütlichkeit ist sehr wichtig.
Ja, vollkommen, aber es ist wie eine Therapie, du liegst auf dem Sofa, ich sitze wie eine Therapeutin vor dir. Was glaubst du, was das bemerkt?
Für mich, das ist nur, wenn ich hier lese, wenn ich denke über neue Projekte. Ich habe meine Enya-Buch hier, genau, geschrieben.
Du kannst im
Mit
Liegen
meinem Laptop
schreiben?
hier, genau. Und ich habe das gemacht jeden Tag für 3 oder 4 Monaten, in Abend. Ein paar Stunden hier, genau, in diese Position, mit Laptop, Joint und Schreiben.
Und Enya Musik?
Nein, keine Musik. I don't listen to music if I'm writing. It's far too distracting. Even good background music like Enya is too distracting for me. I have to write in silence.
Wir haben uns gerade geeinigt, dass wir einfach so sprechen, wie wir möchten. Ich versuche, meine Fragen auf Deutsch zu stellen und du kannst antworten in jeder Sprache, die du möchtest. Englisch komme ich noch mit, bei Französisch.
Ja, pas de problème, on va parler
Je ne parle pas
français, c'est
français.
ça.
Let's talk in English.
Okay.
Okay, we are now here at your home, in your room with all the instruments. Please introduce us. What do we see here?
Well, the most important part of the music room is the couch, because this is where you listen when you're, working on something, and then you need to step out. And man muss objektiv sein. So, man ist subjektiv am Klavier und Idee kommt oder kommt nicht. Versuchen ein bisschen Musik spielen und dann ich muss judge. I have to judge it to see if it's good.
Judge yourself.
Yes, I have to judge myself, and that means I have to switch physically so I can become an objective person and listen to what I did. And so I get on this couch, I lie exactly like you see me here, and I listen. And this is the most important part of my creative process, is the judging, because that is where I decide if something will survive or whether I will leave it on the road to die of starvation.
Okay, you change your position, and now you change your role from a musician to an author, to a writer. And you decided to write about Enya. What was the hardest reaction of friends and people around you about Enya and about the idea to write a book about Enya?
Ja, it's a good question, eine gute Frage. Wenn ich habe erstes Mal erzählt für meinen Freundeskreis, dass ich ein Buch über Enya geschrieben hat, is that right? Geschrieben habe? Die Reaktionen waren lustig, aber richtig. People thought this fits to me, because they understand that I love music that is pleasing to the ear. I'm an entertainer. I think about my audience. I think about what will make them happy or sad or uncomfortable. I like to give them an emotional ride when I play a concert. And I believe that someone like Enya is very, very conscious of her audience. She wants to give them a feeling of comfort. And I believe this is a very humble and a very unpretentious approach to making music that I really admire. And so I thought, I want to write about somebody who inspires me to be as true an artist as I can be, while still aiming directly for the audience. So when Musikbibliothek first began, there were 4 books about, I think, Die Toten Hosen, Take That, Frank Ocean, and Nick Cave.
Yes.
And even though 2 of the authors were women,
Okay.
all of the subjects of these first 4 books were men. Was wir auf Englisch nennt eine Sausagefest, eine Wurstfest. And I thought, I have to write about a woman, because this is really bad. How can there be 4 dudes and no women when women are more than half the population, and women are actually probably the better artists? So for me, it was many, Beach House, Lana Del Rey, Kate Bush, Nina Simone, Cardi B.
Oh, good.
All these people were in my mind, but I couldn't really imagine that any artist that I love and listen to so much, it might be difficult. And Enya, I don't really love her music, but I admire her. I'm fascinated with her career, with her music, with what she represents. And I thought, if I write about someone that I'm such a fan of, it becomes a fan letter. And maybe this is not making for a good book. And I needed a subject that would let me write about myself. Because in the end, I think what works in the Musikbibliothek, when it works, it's when it's very personal.
Yes.
I love Sophie Passman's Frank Ocean book
Yes.
for how personal it is. And I wanted to do something similar. I want to use Enya to write about myself and my ideas about music. And it's not like I sit around every night taking a bath, lighting candles, listening to Enya.
Do yoga.
Maybe only 3 times a week, not like every night. And so Enya became this totem for me to focus on, to write a book about myself, my own taste, and to kind of trace my own musical evolution by talking about Enya, even though she's not even in my top 10 favorite artists, or even my top 10 female artists. But I couldn't just write a book about Lana Del Rey, because all I would say is, I love Lana Del Rey, end of book, So I had to write about someone who lets me write about myself and write about music.
What is it now? Is it a declaration of love? Not? Or is it eine Biografie von dir selbst? Also was fasziniert dich? Was hat dich so gekriegt, dass du gesagt hast, ich mache es aber jetzt trotzdem?
Well, to be honest, the publishers of Musikbibliothek, known as KiWi, they were approaching me to write a kind of, I think what they called it was a musical memoir.
Yes.
So I don't like to talk so much about my personal life. I don't really ever do that on social media or in interviews. I like to keep a certain mystery about what I do. And when I'm on stage, I'm really on stage. But when I'm off stage, I'm really off stage. That's my philosophy. So I would never write a deep personal autobiography. And my life probably hasn't been interesting enough to actually deserve an actual autobiography at my young age of 48. But a musical memoir, it's true that seems like it might be interesting, because I had all of these moments in my musical education and my career that were like epiphanies. Moments where it went ding, and I really learned something about music because of maybe being taught by someone interesting, or maybe just learning the hard way by failing at something. And I thought, if I can collect enough of these stories, maybe I have an interesting musical memoir. And so I started to try to write something in 2016 for KiWi. but I failed. It didn't work. I just sat there, I looked at the blank page, and I was completely terrified. And I would write like one sentence and then just like delete, 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 you know, the usual thing, the real writer's block. And I thought, okay, no, I'm not going to do this. Then they started Musikbibliothek. And then they came to me again and they said, hey, maybe you can't write a musical memoir like you told us, but maybe if you write about someone else, it lets you in to write about yourself. So this was always the idea, I think, of these books. They don't want, I don't think they want people to write a journalist's book about some famous musician. They want people's personal stories and how you can fixate on a certain artist, and an artist can start to mean something to you. And Enya means something to me. And so through writing about her, I'm writing about myself. I wouldn't call it an autobiography, but I would call it a musical memoir.
Ich habe gedacht, wie reagiere ich darauf, wenn mir jemand sagt, den ich cool finde, ich schreibe über Enya. Und ich habe gedacht, Enya ist so ätherisch. Ich hätte Angst, sie kaputt zu machen, wenn ich sie anfasse. Und für mich ist Enya dieses Lied zu 9/11, als die Türme eingestürzt sind. Das war für mich Enya. Was ist da falsch gelaufen, dass ich diesen eingeschränkten Blickwinkel auf diese Künstlerin habe?
I think your blick is correct. She is a New Age singer. Esoterisch, in English, we would say New Age.
Klingt cooler.
And people think of her music as something that is very berührende, comforting, reassuring. It can make you relax. It can make you feel like everything will be okay. And yet, her career, separated from the music, is like a pure, uncompromising punk rock career. Because she does no interviews, no touring. She tells the record company to fuck off. She only sings on like half the songs. And so she actually should be held up as a model of the kind of career you can have where you don't have to do all that terrible, desperate stuff like a podcast. So you see, Enya on one side seems like this very fluffy, light, unserious music that's very unchallenging. But on the other hand, you look at her career and you see what big balls she has and what a badass she is. And I find this fascinating that such a badass can make this music that is like a feather flying into the wind and very, very light. And I love this combination because it's not easy then to say, well, hold on. Is she really mainstream? Because her music itself, for example, it doesn't have any drums in it. It's a small detail, but do you know how rare it is for us to listen to music without drums in it? Pop music without drums is like really unthinkable. These days, if you turn on the radio, all you hear is drums, you know, and then you hear Enya, and all of a sudden you realize this person has just made, you know, this entire sound with drumlessness.
Aber macht Enya Popmusik?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, she's on the radio and she has sold 80 million albums and she has these gigantic hits that we all know. Yeah, absolutely. To me, she's much more radical than we give her credit for. And the reason that people don't think of her as radical is because this music has a soothing quality.
Did you ever meet her?
No, she lives in a castle and doesn't talk to anyone. Nobody talks to her.
Hi, I'm Chilly Gonzales. I'm also a Grammy winner like you. Let's talk about my.
You think I do that? You think I cold call celebrity musicians? And
you are a celebrity.
No, I wrote a book about her because I'm fascinated by her. And I say in the book, I would never in a million years want to try to interview her because I know she hates doing interviews. Why would I force her to do this? And she's not going to open up to me. She's a mysterious, closed-off person who keeps her music separate from her life. And this I respect enormously. It's what I try to do as well, is to keep this boundary. And I believe she deserves that privacy because her music speaks much louder because of that, because we don't know anything about her. She does like one giant interview in every country when her albums come out. So I did say in the book that she does a handful of interviews per album, because I want to make sure that you understand that I'm trying to be truthful about Enya, but I'm also trying to show people my fantasy of Enya.
Yes.
So at the end of the book, I talk about the commercial with Jean-Claude Van Damme, who's doing the splits between two Volvo trucks.
Unbelievable.
While this Enya song, Only Time, plays. And this commercial was like popping the bubble of my fantasy about her, because here I was writing about, she's a pure angel, I wish she was my mother, and all this stuff, you know? And I'm aware of this because I think that's what musicians do. When you get fascinated with them, they become like these fantasy figures for us. And so I have this Enya fantasy that she's this uncompromising, pure angel. And then I see this commercial and I realize, oh, as long as there's enough money, of course, she's going to let her song be used in a commercial, just like the rest of us. And it kind of brings her back down to earth at the end of the book. So yes, of course, she's going to once in a while be on like a very mainstream public TV show. But let me have my fantasy, please.
Yes, of course.
Please don't pop the bubble too much, because I need Enya to be that angel for me. You know, that's I think the point of the book, is we make these fantasies out of the musicians that we listen to. And of course, they are just people. She is a capitalist. I mean, she sold 80 million albums, and you don't do that by accident.
Let's talk about guilty pleasures. War es schwierig für dich, das laut auszusprechen? Zu sagen, ja, ich schreibe über Enya. Du hättest ein Video machen können in deiner Pop-Music Masterclass. Du hättest sie auf einem Konzert zitieren können, aber du hast ein Buch geschrieben. Und du hast ja auch gesagt, es gab auch belustigte Reaktionen darüber, dass ja, also Chilly und Enya, wie passt das denn zusammen? Warum ist es so schwierig, manchmal zu Musik zu stehen oder zu Künstlern zu stehen, die man toll findet?
Es sollte nicht schwer sein. Guilty Pleasures sollte nicht existieren. Guilty Pleasures ist eine dritte Kategorie von Geschmack. Die erste Kategorie von Geschmack ist unser echter Geschmack von Kindheit. Wenn wir haben nicht eine selbstbewusste Konzepte von Geschmack. Wir haben eine involuntary, physiologisches Reaction to music. Ein Kind kann nicht denken und sagen, I like it, but maybe I shouldn't like it. Das existiert nicht für ein Kind.
Wie wunderbar.
Ein Kind hat eine direkt Ja oder Nein Reaction. Für Musik, für Movies, für Art, whatever. Das ist unser echter Geschmack. Und dann später, wenn wir vielleicht Teenager sein, wir haben einen neuen Geschmack. Und dieser Geschmack it's a bit more about defining yourself. Which social group do you belong to? Maybe you have people you admire. You look up to them and you say, oh, that guy, he seems interesting,
yes,
and he likes Prince. Maybe I should like Prince. Und you get into this kind of intellectual kind of fetishization of other people's taste. And so you kind of allow your taste to be channeled through other people and social groups and your view of yourself and who you would like to be. This is the zweite Kategorie von Geschmack. And I think in a way these are sometimes fighting. And then you have the third category, which is when you still have a physical reaction to something, but you're embarrassed because it is in conflict with the second Geschmack. And so you have to create this third category called the guilty pleasure, where you say, I like it, but I know I shouldn't. And this to me is traurig. I think we should be able to just say we like things. And I think it's frustrating. And I know this because I went through this in my experience. I also was in this conflict between what's my real taste, but how do I see myself in the world? And I was embarrassed of my taste for a long time. And I think
Do you have an example for us?
Well, yeah, I was embarrassed of listening to jazz fusion, for example. I talk about that a lot in the book. My real taste was jazz fusion.
Yes.
I was embarrassed about this. And instead, I pretended to like alternative rock because I thought that was more socially acceptable. So I started to listen to, for example, Pavement, who I really didn't like, but I forced myself to like them because I was in conflict with my real taste. And I'm embarrassed that I had this moment of weakness where I couldn't just be proud of my real taste. So maybe this book will allow people to think about, maybe they can get in touch with their true taste a little bit more. Because I think it's not productive for us to have this guilty pleasure category. I think it creates a kind of hierarchy of music, and it actually makes people conform much more when they're so aware of what everyone else likes. Probably social media even made this worse, because now we know what everyone thinks all the time. And we know if we're supposed to like something before we even have a chance to experience it. So I can't judge. What's that Netflix show about the guy in the zoo? The Tiger King.
Okay, yes.
So, for example, this is an example that just came to mind because there was a moment where all of a sudden, everybody told me I have to like the Tiger King. I haven't seen the Tiger King. I haven't watched it. But
I don't like it when everyone says you will like it.
There you go. And guilty pleasures, a big reason they exist is because of this pressure that people feel to like or not like something. So we have too much awareness of what everybody else thinks, and we don't have a chance to be in touch with our true taste. It's been corrupted. There is a corruption in our concept of taste from the constant consensus. And different people have different reactions. There are people who feel very weak and they instantly will like what everyone else likes. And so they say, oh, everyone likes Tiger King. I'm going to watch Tiger King and I love it. Then there are people like me. I have the opposite reaction. It pushes me away. Mm-hmm. So one of my favorite artists, I told you, is Lana Del Rey. When Lana Del Rey first came out, everybody loved her so much. And then some people hated her because they thought she was inauthentic. And with this whole debate happening, it pushed me away. I thought, I am not going to be able to listen to this and judge it because I'm too corrupted already. And I needed like 8 years. And then 8 years later, I could finally start to listen to her. Maybe 3 years ago, I finally started to listen to her music almost by accident. And I really fell in love with it. But it took me all of that time until nobody was talking about her anymore for me to actually make my own opinion about it. And so I get angry that there's all of this noise that means that I can't really have a direct relationship with my own taste. And I think that led me to write the book because it's been kind of a pain in my ass the whole last 10 years when people are always asking me, what's your guilty pleasure? Or I can't believe you like this, or this and that. And if you think about it, taste, the conversation about taste could be very simple. It could be just, I like this, I don't like this, end of story. But we try to convince each other. We try to tell each other that the other one is wrong or that the other one is right. Or we tell the world what we like because we want the world to see us a certain way. It's actually kind of fucked up if you think about it. It could be as simple as we don't really talk about taste. You know, like in some societies, they don't talk about money. In some societies, they don't talk about politics. In some societies, they don't talk about personal things in the public sphere.
But we should always talk about music and the taste of music, or what would you like to say?
I think we shouldn't. I think it's better if we don't talk about taste. Like in my ideal world, you like what you like and you never have to tell anyone about it. Because what's the point of actually having a discussion about what you like unless you're trying to convince the other person, unless you're trying to win an argument, unless you're trying to prove something to somebody. And that's not what taste should be. Taste should be, I like it or I don't. It actually could be so simple. But taste has become a kind of battlefield for people's egos, for people's idea of class or being in a kind of elite, of being in a certain social group versus another.
Yes.
And I think it's a bit sad that the conversation about taste is never as simple as you're allowed to like whatever you like. No guilt, only pleasure.
We are in a sort of therapy situation. Can you tell us about the moment of your coming out that you say, yes, I love fusion jazz fusion, and I really don't like alternative rock?
Yeah, it probably happened when I moved to Berlin in 1998. I can remember it like it was yesterday. And that was a moment where I decided to become more myself. And I know that sounds strange because you should just be yourself. You shouldn't have to become more yourself. But I was coming from a real obsession with wanting to show myself to the world. And I wanted to do that through a music career. I was chasing this kind of high of feeling like you exist for people and getting up on stage and trying to get the love that you were missing from a bunch of strangers. It's very common that performers have a kind of light psychopathic problem where they need to look for this validation in a way from all the wrong places. You know, if you're very emotionally and mentally healthy, you probably don't need to become a performer, if we're honest. So it's a certain kind of person who wants to become a performer. This is where I was coming from. But I was doing it in a way that was inauthentic in Canada. So I had a kind of alternative rock band, and we signed to a major label, Warner Brothers, and I went through the whole sort of pretense of trying to be this alternative rock singer, actually. I had a shaved head, and I was like jumping around and kind of like singing very loudly and really like trying to get people's attention.
It's hard for me to imagine that.
Sorry?
It's hard for me to imagine that.
I mean, if you do look at the documentary about me that came out a couple of years ago called Shut Up and Play the Piano, they have a little bit of footage from some of our videos. So you could actually see like 8 seconds of me with the shaved head jumping around being like an alternative rock singer. But I wasn't being myself. My sense of humor was not there. My true musical taste was definitely not represented in what I was doing. And it didn't work. I mean, the project failed. We put out an album and nobody was interested. And I know why, because I wasn't being myself. And there was a moment where I thought, okay, if I really want to try and make a go of this music thing, I have to hit reset. I'm going to move somewhere new so that I can be a little bit less aware of what other people are thinking, you know? This is the same problem with taste, is we always know what the other people think, and we lose touch with ourselves because we're so aware of what everyone else is doing. So I thought if I move away from Canada and move to a new place where I don't even speak the language,
Is it important for that to move away?
For me, it was to get the antennas up and to be not aware of what anyone is thinking about you. You then get into a much deeper relationship with yourself because you don't really have access to the sort of what's everyone thinking? You know, you're sort of turn inward in a really positive way. So when I got to Berlin, all of a sudden I felt free to put my real sense of humor into my music. All of a sudden I felt like I could be this virtuoso. I don't have to be embarrassed about being a kind of trained musician with this musical brain that can analyze things, you know, and I don't have to pretend to be something I'm not. And so I took those building blocks, my sense of humor, my musical virtuosity, my actual taste, and I started to make music under the name Chilly Gonzales, where I felt, in a way, protected to be myself. You know, it's strange, I know, to take a different name and say that that enables me to be more myself, but that was my way. My way was to exaggerate my true taste. And by exaggerating it, much as a rapper would, and make it larger than life, and turn myself into almost a cartoon character, inside of that, I was free to sort of do anything. And to be a very trained musician was suddenly not going to be a problem. And to have my a sense of humor be a big part of what I did. To get on stage and be able to make people laugh and make myself laugh and do things that I think were interesting and funny. It just set me free, you know, to get away from the music scene that I was stuck in Canada. So that was probably the moment where I said, I won't feel guilty for being the kind of musician that I am. I won't feel guilty for wanting to combine a kind of serious music approach with a ridiculous sense of humor. I mean, all of these things seemed like they shouldn't work. But I thought, it's me, so it has to work. And I just need to find the right mold to pour it all into. And that turned out to be, you know, thinking of this ridiculous name, Chilly Gonzales, and moving to a new place where I just wasn't aware of what people thought about me. And it was a very liberating moment.
How do they react at home?
In Canada?
Yes.
It took a while, but they started to appreciate what I was doing. I didn't really go back to Canada for the first few years. I was just so excited to be touring in Germany and France and the UK and Italy. And it was also exciting. I thought, okay, fuck Canada, you know, okay. Let's just forget about that place. And then maybe after a few years, I thought, okay, maybe I'm ready to show them what I've been able to become. You know, I don't blame Canada. It could be that there's a musician in Germany right now who needs to move to Canada to do what I did. So it's not about what place you're from, but maybe it's about just you need to leave that place in order to find yourself.
Aber ich habe auch gelesen, dass du in Berlin erst einmal in einem Dessous-Geschäft Klavier gespielt hast. You played in a Dessous shop, in a shop for lingerie?
Yeah, I played. Yeah, I had quite a few
it was
working man piano jobs in the restaurants and hotels and a lingerie shop, yeah.
And was it to test it out, what you are?
It was to make money. I had to survive.
Of course, but also
I had to survive from my music. I mean, no. I mean, you do background music when you're playing in a shop like that. There's no performance. You're just being a useful musical soundtrack, which is, you know, a very legitimate thing. I respect background music. I respect all the musicians who aren't as lucky as me to play their own music in a philharmony. I remember my working class musician days. And I think how lucky I was to be able to move to a new country where I don't speak the Sprache and be able to just make money playing piano in a store or a restaurant is like a real privilege. And so no, it's you know, how can I put it except to say, as a musician, you need to respect all the ways that people listen to music. You can't always think that people are going to use music as a, you know, they're going to listen to everything you say closely and hang on every note and love every song of yours. Sometimes you're just there to provide the atmosphere. And I really respect that. I think it's, if a musician never had to do that, then maybe they're living in an Elfenbeinturm. Most music is consumed as background music, if we're really honest. You know, it's the radio in the car. It's, you know, People put on music when they do the dishes. It's everywhere as background, and that's not bad. We need Hintergrundmusik and Vorgrundsmusik. Vorgrund? No.
Nein.
There, I just invented it.
Okay.
Vorgrundsmusik is just as important as Hintergrundsmusik. I think it's a very important part of my musical makeup that I had this time where I had to survive playing music in a way that was very honest and very direct and unpretentious and basically has no fantasy. It makes you humble to do that.
Let's come back to the guilty pleasures. And wer entscheidet eigentlich, was cool ist und was nicht cool ist?
Well, in a perfect world, everyone decides for themselves. But we don't live in the perfect world.
I would say.
So
we don't live in
I would
perfect
say it's a combination of groupthink, the hive mind of social media now. But it used to be, I would say, musical journalists and tastemakers and other musicians. Then when social media happened, everybody became kind of a musical journalist. And so now I would say it's determined by this invisible conformity. Conformismus? Is that a word?
Yes.
Yes. Now it's something that is just created by its own energy, this feeling that there's this consensus that just emerges. An album comes out and everyone decides to elevate it. And you don't even have time to notice it. It's just there one day. And everyone suddenly says, Kendrick Lamar. And all of a sudden, everyone has to love Kendrick Lamar.
Yeah.
You know, like it's just, they passed a law almost. So it happens almost, you can't pinpoint one single tweet or one single post, but you just know it. You just feel it. It's like a wave rising from the ocean and you have to surf on it or drown. So there's not one person who decides. It's millions of people or maybe hundreds of thousands or I don't know who, but it just happens. And that can't be right. It can't be right that everybody loves the same things. And so you realize that it's become corrupted and that many people just feel the wave is too big for me to resist. I'm just going to surf on it because it's there. And it grows exponentially. And you have this giant wave called Kendrick Lamar consensus. But I think, honestly, there are people who are just maybe not musicians and who suddenly realize there's this wave called Kendrick Lamar consensus, and they then go to listen to the album and they can't listen to it objectively anymore because they've been told to like it. Now, I have a different personality. If someone tells me to like something, I push the other way. So I enjoy telling people I don't like Kendrick Lamar because I have this kind of personality where I enjoy provoking people a little bit. Also, I provoke them by saying I wrote a book about Enya. There's always a little bit of provocation in going against these waves of consensus, but I'm a special case because I'm a public musician, and so I have a certain personality that I put out there. So I'm not really the person who has this struggle anymore. My struggle with guilty pleasures is over. Like 15 or 20 years ago. I don't have this problem anymore.
Ich bewundere dich dafür.
But I did have this problem in my 20s. So I know what it feels like to struggle and to say, I have to like Pavement. Pavement is just Kendrick Lamar 30 years ago for me, It's, again, something I was told to like, and so I couldn't resist it, and I decided to just give in. And I listened to it not in a very authentic, objective way, but I already knew what I was looking for. I was looking to like it because I'd been told to like it. And I think there are still many people like that who are still battling with this, who are struggling with this. And maybe if they read my book, they just can ask themselves the question, well, wait a second, what was my childhood like? What did I really like when I was a childhood? What was the first music that gave me goosebumps? And maybe I can get back in touch with that instead of suffering under these waves of consensus that come along.
Ich war mal mit einem Jazzgitarristen zusammen, einem sehr guten Jazzgitarristen. Und der nahm mich immer mit zu seinen Leuten. Und dann waren da ganz tolle Musiker und die plötzlich anfingen zu spielen und zu improvisieren und alle waren ganz elektrisiert. Und ich merkte auch, dass die mit den Instrumenten, die hatten eine tolle Kommunikation miteinander, aber ich habe sie nicht verstanden. Ich hab keinen Zugang zu denen gefunden und es hat mich überhaupt nicht berührt. Im Gegenzug berührt es mich aber, wenn Campino von den Toten Hosen singt, ich will nicht ins Paradies, wenn der Weg dahin so schwierig ist. Da frage ich mich, was stimmt mit mir nicht und schäme mich, weil da ist diese coole Musik und ich spüre da nichts. Ist es vielleicht am Ende spannender oder ehrlicher zu sagen, wenn man etwas Offensichtliches nicht mag?
But jazz musicians generally don't think so much about the audience. Jazz musicians play for other jazz musicians.
Oh, thank you.
And Campino is a proper artist and entertainer who wants to express something to people. So you can't compare these two kinds of musicians. It's unfair.
I thought I'm not smart enough for the music.
Oh, but that's
Should we change the position? Should I lay down now on the couch? No.
I mean, this is exactly why I wrote the book, because it does make me a little bit sad to think that you had to question yourself by thinking you didn't understand something. The reason you were not touched by that jazz music is the fault of the jazz musicians. They're the ones with the problem, not you. They made music that doesn't communicate to people. And that is their choice. That's fine. But they have to understand they will not have a really meaningful relationship with an audience if they don't take care to express something to them. And Campino puts a lot of thought and energy and struggle into expressing himself so that you will identify with what he's singing and you will get those goosebumps and feel it. And of course, I'm in the Campino category. I hope. I try to be like a Campino. I don't want to be like one of those jazz musicians who plays for other musicians who says, oh, you don't understand it, you're stupid. I mean, I know that they didn't say that, but
yes.
In a way you felt this. And this is really not right. This is really a big injustice that you had to listen to this music and think, maybe I don't understand it. No. Their music is not understandable. End of story. And Campino, the reason he's brilliant and the reason he is where he is, he's an icon and living legend, is because he's really aware of his audience in a respectful way, that he wants to create a bond with them. This is all I want to do, is create a bond with my audience. And I especially can do that in concert. That's a moment I can really sort of hopefully reach into their brains and their hearts and create this connection. And many musicians in the classical and jazz world, they don't really feel this in a deep way. Their relationship with the audience is much more transactional, actually. And you see it. You feel it in the body language. You feel it in how they don't look at the audience. They don't talk to them. They don't engage them. They don't prepare enough to be able to have those moments of spontaneity. You know, the thing about the classical and jazz world is they secretly hate the audience.
What?
They secretly hate the audience because they feel today, in 2020, most classical and jazz musicians, and I say most, not all, but most think, why isn't classical or jazz more popular with young people? What happened? Why did the audience start to listen to all this pop music? How come they don't like us anymore? And my reaction, if I start to lose the audience, is I better change. I have to do something to get them. So if I start a concert and I'm not getting my audience, it's like, uh-oh, okay. What can I do now? I have to change what I'm doing. And the classical and jazz people, their reaction is, no, the audience has to change. The audience has to understand us. I mean, how fucked up is that? It's so idle to think that the audience has to make the effort to understand what I'm doing. It's all wrong. I have to make the effort so that the audience will understand what I'm doing. It's all on me. It's my Verantwortung. This is what makes me an entertainer and not some masturbating artist. I want to make love to my audience, and so I'm aware. What do they like? Do they like it when I kiss them on the neck? Oh, no, they like it better when I kiss them on the ear. You know, that's what you do when you're like a responsible lover. That's what I do with my audience. But to sit there and be like, I'm masturbating, how come the other person isn't enjoying watching me masturbate? I mean, come on.
Okay.
Get out of here.
Und wenn wir jetzt noch einmal über Enya sprechen, was tut Enya für ihr Publikum, wenn sie, wie du sagst, eher keine Interviews gibt, er nicht auf Tour geht und wirklich ihr Ding nur macht? Warum funktioniert es dann bei ihr?
Yeah, because in her case, the music is enough. This is what she proved. She proved that just by making an album every 6, 7 years, that she still has her army of fans who will just rush to hear it. Because to be mysterious is another way of creating the bond with the audience. So if I see Miles Davis performing in the 1960s, he has his back to the audience. If I look at Daft Punk, who wear
the helmets,
robot helmets, we don't even know what they look like.
Yes.
If I look at Banksy,
yes, okay.
if I read Elena Ferrante,
yeah,
nobody knows who she is. This is a very valid way of being. It might seem like it goes against what I'm saying. My way of creating a bond with the audience is very literal. This is the solution I found, is to engage them. It's my face, it's my personality, it's my voice, and I reach out and I create this moment. I wear my Pantoffeln and I turn a Philharmony with 2,000 people into my living room.
Yes.
That's my solution.
I felt so.
Enya's solution is something totally different. But the jazz musicians who just play for each other, they're not even trying to find a solution. So just because Enya is mysterious and in a way inaccessible, it doesn't mean that she's still not very conscious of how she creates something for the audience to identify with. And I think because she's so inaccessible and mysterious, it attracts people. So maybe some jazz musicians or classical musicians could take a page out of the book of someone like Miles Davis or Banksy or Enya. A mysterious jazz musician would be great. I think it's a very valid solution. Sometimes I look at people like Daft Punk and I think, wow, their life must be so easy in a way because their music is so much more famous than they are. And this would be the ultimate dream for me, to have your music be famous and still touch people, but that you don't actually have to be the one to always carry it. I mean, this is the dream. This is really the dream. I don't think I'm able to do that. My solution involved being very much involved in taking my music and presenting it for people in a way that, like, look, here it is, this is what I'm doing, and I'm including you in it. That was my solution. But of course, the people I really admire, they managed to do it while still keeping that mystery. I mean, that's phenomenal. I think that's what Enya has done. And I talk a lot in the book of how I wish I could be more like her. And I give lots of examples of moments where I was too desperate. And I would just say yes to everything.
And you regretted it too.
And I regret it in many cases, because I think as an artist, you should be, in a way, more protective of the things you make. And by putting on those helmets, Daft Punk are actually protecting themselves and protecting the music in a way. And Enya protects her music also by not taking every opportunity that other artists like me might take. And so she's like a real role model, I think, a real Vorbild for someone like me. I hope to become more like her as time goes on. When I wrote the book, I had to really be honest. And as I started to write, I'm like, oh my God, really, I'm just seeing just how much there's so much desperation in what I do and what I did. And it's getting a little bit better, but still a lot of desperation. You know, there's still a moment where I'm ready in a way to throw my music out the window if it means I'll get a chance to promote it a little bit.
Wie war es überhaupt für dich zu schreiben, ein Buch zu schreiben und nicht etwas, woraus dann eine Musik wird? Nur zu schreiben.
Well, as I told you, I tried to write some kind of musical memoir already, and really it was so difficult, and I gave up pretty quickly because it was very painful. And so I just thought, I'm only going to do this if it comes naturally. And then I had this sort of aha moment where I was sitting with Sophie Passmann, who did a great job translating my book into German, by the way. And she's a friend, so she really knows where I'm coming from. And that really helped her, I think, become the best translator candidate for this job. And she had just written the Frank Ocean book. And she said, you should really write one of these. I said, yeah, you know, but I tried already to write something and it didn't work. And she said, you should just think about it. And that's when I had this moment of thinking, okay, I should write about a woman because otherwise everybody wrote about men. And then when I had the Enya sort of click, I sat down and I started to write, and I just didn't stop for 3 months. And when it ended, it was like definitely over. And I could not write another thing now.
It's a great moment.
It's a great moment, and I think it's never going to happen again. I'm pretty sure I'll never write another book. I think I had this one book inside of me. It flowed out very naturally. It was just, there was no pain in these 3 months other than the pain of putting into words some things that are a little bit uncomfortable about my own desperation, about a little bit about my mother, which something I didn't really talk about before, but
yes.
I talk a little bit about her in this book. And so in some ways there was a kind of difficulty of forcing myself to really be honest, but that wasn't so hard, to be honest. What was hard was trying to write about myself just like that. But when it was through Enya, all of a sudden it became easy to find 1,000 stories I could tell, because maybe that's what artists need is to project and deflect, and to just come out and say something about yourself might be the hardest thing in the world. So to do it where you throw a ball and it bounces off 5 sides of the room to get to the truth, then so be it. I guess that's what I needed in order to be able to open up, was to make it seem like it wasn't about me. That's the trick. You think you're writing about Enya, but you're writing about yourself. And I guess many artists, whenever they make anything, it's like that. If you're a sculptor, you know, you're doing a sculpture of the Virgin Mary, but really you're saying something about yourself. You think you're making a movie about gangsters, but you're really making a statement about yourself. So I think that's maybe the beauty of all art, is you look for something outside of yourself, you express something about it, and you think you're talking about an object. You know, I'm taking a picture of this bathrobe hanging here, but really I'm letting people know what it's like to be in my head, because they're seeing it from my perspective. So to talk about Enya in the end is to talk about myself.
Thank you, Chilly Gonzales.
Thank you, Sabine Heinrich.
I guess our therapy session is now over.
How much do I owe you?
It's okay.
Really?
Next time you will pay.
Okay. Next time you're on the couch,
Yes,
I'm over there.
we change.
And we're going to solve your problems.
We have to talk. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Chilly, and all the best for you. Enya erschien in der KiWi Musikbibliothek von Kiepenheuer und Witsch, geschrieben von Chilly Gonzales.
KiWi Musikbibliothek. Radikal subjektive Liebeserklärungen an die Musik.